So in this lecture, we're going to quickly walk through what might be a DOK 3 level question on a summative, and show, talk about why it might be considered that, and then just go through the process. For me, the big reason this is a DOK 3 as opposed to something a little more, challenging like a DOK 4 would be you're being told right in the instructions what to do, right? Create a stem and leaf plot. Right, there it is. Not a lot of, gee, I wonder what I should do. You're being told what to do. So that's, in my opinion, when you kind of get the hint in the instructions and you know how to make that call your own, that's one way to differentiate between a DOK 3 and a DOK 4, where it might be, well, we'll talk about that in another lecture. Right? So they're telling you to make a stem and leaf, and these 38 values here are pretty good values for such a graph because you've got a good range. You've got things from 60s, I think 60s, yeah, 60s are the lowest, all the way up to the 150s. Right? So this is not a situation where we will have to split the stems, because we do have enough. We'll have enough to be able to determine any sort of patterns or what, the shape and such, and if there are any unusual features, without having to split them. So it would look like this. I did it kind of behind the scenes here. I'm not going to do it live because it is a little tedious, but really what you want to do is, what I would recommend doing anyway, is as you go through, identify the high and low values, and then just, circle all the 60s. That way you can kind of keep track of, so you have 60, 68 over here, 65 over here, and so on and so forth. You can keep track of them all, and you're not going to miss any. So you'll know, okay, at least I have 5 60s, 5 values in the 60s. So then you can look at it and say, I have 2 65s, 2 68s, and a 69, which gives you 5, 5, 8, and 9. Right? You don't want to forget the title. And be as specific as you can. This is the horsepower of cars reviewed by Consumer Reports. And include the key. It doesn't matter which value you pick. You could pick any of them. I just happen to pick the low one, or one of the low ones. But just so people know from looking at it what they're looking at. And then you can cross them off as you go. Because for me, that's the biggest challenge, is to make sure I don't overlook any. And take the time to count. Take the time to know how many values you have in the distribution, and then how many, and count the number of leaves over here, and it should match up. And if you're missing some, like I did initially when I went through this, you got to kind of hunt through and find them. But you have it all there, and again, this is clearly nothing we need to split the stems for. We could. It's not really going to gain us much. It probably wouldn't change much by way of our conclusions, but it actually, it actually might, because it might make it a little more tricky, right? Because when it says describe the distribution, remember, we always want to talk about GSOCs, right? Gaps, outliers, shape, center, and spread. And I know I did that out of order, but I wanted to make sure that shape, center, and spread were kind of together, right? Yes, these should be switched, but the shape, center, and spread are the key ones, because this shape determines center, which determines spread. So if we look at this one is pretty darn, we've got towers of 5, 4, 5, 3, 5, 4, 4. That's pretty uniform, right? So what I said was the distribution of horsepowers is pretty much uniform, with maybe a slight skew to the right or the high side. There you do have these smattering over here, only one in the 140s and a couple in the 150s. Everyone else, every other category has at least 3. So this is uniform with a slight skew but since we're going uniform, if you wanted to stick with uniform, that's fine. The median horsepower is about 100. Again, if you wanted to go with mean, you could, but if you go with mean, you're going to go with you're going to want to find the standard deviation to measure the spread, and that would require that you plug all those into the calculator. Unnecessary, really. You don't need to do that. Especially since if you say it's slightly skewed to the right side, then it'll kind of force you to stick with the mean, or the median rather. And I just did the range, really, because most of the values are going to be in that range. I mean, it's going to be between 65 and 155. Have I said, have I seen some people interpret this as most of the values fall between 65 and 138? Yeah, that's fine too, right? That's fine too. As long as you get a sense of where somebody looking at this could say, yeah, most of the horsepower falls within here and here. Usually when we mention IQR, it's because that's where the most values are, but it's not necessarily the case. You're going to have as many on the outskirts as you are, since it's pretty much uniform, as you are in the central 50. So, yeah, that's totally fine for the describing of the distribution. There are no gaps, so you don't have to speak to them, and probably these aren't outliers either. We haven't really determined that yet, but this is, when we're talking the difference between 138 and 155, probably not enough to warrant the outlier label. So you don't really, these are if they are there, you need to speak to them, but if they're not, you can include a statement of there are no significant gaps or outliers, and cover all your bases, right? But that's how you might create a stem and leaf display, and then describe it. And remember, the stem and leaf is whatever your numbers are. I don't think I really talked about this before. Our numbers are primarily in the 2 or 3 digit numbers, so whole numbers. So the whatever's in the ones place is your leaf. That's the last value that's going to be changing. Everything else is going to be a stem. So tens and hundreds places are going to be your stems. Right? So that would be, I would consider that a DOK3, because you'd have to know how to do that. You'd have to know how to make sure you label it properly. Again, I did this with a document thing, so the numbers are all about the same width, but you're going to want to make sure they're fairly, same shape, fairly lined up, and then it's you also have to know how to describe it all. Right? So I hope that helped with the DOK3 level question and a stem and leaf plot.